Hello everybody, welcome to The World This Week. From the campaign trail to the all-white Oscars, these are some of the stories that define the world this week.
You ready for a commander-in-chief who will let our warriors do their job and go kick ISIS ass?
About free trade deals. This shocking event was reacted to years ago when it happened, and we're toughening our action again today.
The week. With me this Sunday are Professor Yossi Shane of Georgetown and Tel Aviv Universities and Tal Shalev of I-24 News. Just, Yossi, when you thought this campaign is not going to get more interesting than this, it might. And we're talking Michael Bloomberg.
Michael Bloomberg is entering, perhaps, I don't know yet, but certainly everything is warming up toward the primaries. We see that the entire idea that the two parties will come as any traditional candidate is absolutely unclear. Trump, on the one hand, was surprising everybody and is now, in fact, garnering the support of the mainstream in the party, understanding that he perhaps is the front runner. On the other, Sanders is completely uncovering Hillary's sort of like vulnerabilities. And Bloomberg perhaps is finding himself to be another viable candidate within this kind of like mayhem that is now struck. This is a very interesting...
that's on paper. He may run as an independent. He may run Tal. Do you think there's any chance?
Well, I think Bloomberg has been flirting with this idea for years, and it's not the first time he has support from a group of very, very significant businessmen in New York. And the Republicans seem to believe that if he does enter the race, it will only help them because he is considered quite liberal, and one of his main topics is gun control, and that he will not appeal to any one of the Republican constituents. But there's also the time factor. If he doesn't enter, that we have candidates that have been rallying and campaigning for months already. So he has to decide when to enter the race. It might be too late at some point for an independent candidate to even change the game.
Yeah, I think he set a deadline for the end of March. One thing is for sure, when Bloomberg, if and when he's president, the relationship between United States, Israel, White House, Netanyahu will be totally different, which brings me to the ambassador, the U.S. ambassador to Israel, Dan Shapiro, this week, talking about this.
We are concerned and perplexed by Israel's strategy on settlements. This government and previous Israeli governments have repeatedly expressed their support for a negotiated two-state solution. Yet separation will become more and more difficult if Israeli plans to continue to expand the footprint of settlements. What is Israel's plan for resolving the conflict, for remaining a Jewish and democratic state? And if it judges a political solution to be out of reach for the time being, then what is its plan for managing and stabilizing the conflict in the short and medium term?
Flat out, Tal.
Well, definitely. You know, Shapiro is usually one of the most popular and likable American officials in Jerusalem throughout this whole course of tensions between the Obama administration and Netanyahu's government. Shapiro usually was the one who was still accepted and still greeted in Netanyahu's office. But his words are basically a sign that something is really bad between Washington and Jerusalem. This is the second time he's been vocally critical, openly critical of the Israeli government's policy in the past month. He also had a public critic of this controversial NGO transparency bill, and his words are widely interpreted as a sign that Washington is really fed up.
Yeah, this is not out of his mind, just like that. Of course, it's coming from someplace.
I was there when he gave his speech. It was clear in my mind that the speech was given to him. This is an official speech of the White House. And of course, Netanyahu was quick to condemn. Now, some people will ask why Netanyahu was so quick to condemn rather than overlook the speech. And I was thinking a lot about it. I think Netanyahu was right. I really think he was right to condemn. The text was inappropriate in that respect, that this is an ambassador reprimanding the state of Israel from the podium in Tel Aviv. And this is in the midst of kind of like stabbing spree that is going on in Jerusalem. Now, these are ongoing issues with regard to the territories, with regard to the settlements and so on between the two administrations. But the administration is also finding a very soft spot in Israel in order to attack the government whenever the administration is uncomfortable in other terrains. And this is something which was very evident.
Right. Professor Shine and Tal Shalev, I thank you very much. Wendy Sherman served as Undersecretary of State for Political Affairs and was the U.S. negotiator for the Iran nuclear deal. And she joins us. Ms. Sherman, thank you very much for joining us.
Sure, glad to be here.
Let me quote Donald Trump. It's the worst deal ever. Flawed inspections. Iran is going to get $150 billion, and the Russians are getting the nuclear material instead of the U.S. Your response?
Well, I think what's important here is what not only is in the interest of the United States of America, but the interest of the world as well, and that is to make sure that Iran never has a nuclear weapon. And this deal does indeed ensure that. And if for some reason Iran does not comply with the deal is not based on trust, it's based on verification. And so if at any time Iran does not comply, the United States unilaterally or with others will take action, and I am certain of that. So what I would say to all of the critics, and I know there are many, and I understand the concerns that people have, is that this is not a deal about trust, this is a deal about verification and ensuring the security of not only the United States, but the security of the world.
How can you ensure real verification?
Well, I think you ensure real verification because you know what's going on, and we do in Iran because we have closed down all the pathways to fissile material that's needed to build a nuclear weapon, because the International Atomic Energy Agency has 24/7 access every day, every hour of the year, in any way it needs to, that we have eyes on the entire supply chain needed to build a nuclear weapon. And if Iran steps outside of this agreement, the United States will take action. President Obama means what he says. He will not allow Iran to have a nuclear weapon, and I am sure that the next president of the United States will feel exactly the same way.
You know that the Iranians have cheated before.
Of course, but again, this is not about whether we trust. This is about whether we can verify and monitor, whether it is difficult, nearly impossible for Iran to get a nuclear weapon because it would have to create a whole new supply chain. And look, we are going to continue to brief and consult with our partners and our allies. We have a very volatile Middle East. Everyone in Israel knows that far better even than I do. And Iran with a nuclear weapon would make that instability even greater and create even greater uncertainty for the security that's needed for the people here in this country and throughout the region and the world.
Aren't you afraid that this deal will boost Iran's capabilities to finance more terrorism in the Middle East and the world?
Well, first of all, as you noted, candidates are throwing around all kinds of numbers of billions of dollars that are available to Iran. In fact, there's probably only about $50 billion of unfrozen assets, their own money that has been frozen in accounts internationally, that will now be available to them. The rest of the money that was frozen is in actually junk loans or loans to China and not liquid to them. And just to get back to where they would have been if there hadn't been sanctions is probably a 3 to 5 year process. They need $150 billion just to take care of their oil refineries. They are very, very deep in the hole. And we are maintaining all of our sanctions on their missile program, on their acts of state sponsorship of terrorism, on their acts of instability in the region. And so, in fact, if they use monies to foment these other very bad things, we can take action to sanction them in those arenas. So we have gotten, I believe, something very important here, making sure that Iran can never have a nuclear weapon and maintaining our ability to make them pay a price for the other very difficult and bad things that they have been doing to create greater insecurity in the world.
I know that you are familiar with the North Korean nuclear program, and they just had another test recently. Isn't this the perfect example of a rogue nation that was given the same treatment as Iran?
Well, actually, the agreed framework, which I did not negotiate, it was negotiated by Ambassador Robert Gallucci, was a 4-page document. This Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action is many, many pages longer. A great deal was learned from the North Korean experience, but these are two very different situations. North Korea is more like a cult than a country. Iran is a country. It has a large middle class and a large economy. North Korea is, quite frankly, a complete basket case. And one of the things that happened as a result of the experience in North Korea is the additional protocol was created by the International Atomic Energy Agency and the Board of Governors to ensure that there would be access to any site of concern in a country like Iran if there's reason to suspect that there might be a covert facility. And that includes military sites. So we have in this agreement not only have the additional protocol, but an absolutely guaranteed access to a site if we have concern.
Wendy Sherman, I thank you very much.
Sure, thank you.
Let's try to put some sense into what's happening in the global markets with Adam Johnson, editor of Bold Global Media Markets. He joins us from New York. Thank you, Adam, for joining us.
Oh, thanks for having me, Jacob.
Well, a simple question. What triggered this bloodbath in the markets, and when is it going to end?
China. China was a canary in the coal mine that let everybody realize, wait a minute, we have been effectively going very far afield thanks to low interest rates, or because of low interest rates from central banks all over the world. So in other words, global investors were saying we can't make any money holding sovereign bonds, corporate bonds. We have to go to places like China and try to make some money there. Only problem is you can only prop up markets so far for so long before people realize, wait a minute, we've got an issue. That's what China was. It was the wake-up call. And as China started to sell off, global investors then said, we just need to scale back risk in general.
Well, how come suddenly everybody is saying that the Chinese economy is broken? I mean, where are those very smart financial analysts?
What's happening in China is not a surprise. But remember, until someone says the emperor has no clothes, you think the emperor has clothes. What we have experienced is a recognition, finally, and there have been a lot of people like Jim Chanos, probably the best-known short seller here in the United States, who has been railing against China for 4 years. But, you know, there's been this wall of money supported by low rates from central banks that has forced global investors into places they shouldn't have gone, like China. Everyone wanted to keep believing the emperor had clothes, but at some point you realize the emperor doesn't have clothes. There's still growth in China. It's just not the kind of growth that we thought. It's 6%. We're here in the U.S. only growing 2%, so they're actually growing a lot faster than we are.
Let's talk about oil. When oil is expensive, they say it's bad for the economy, it's more expensive to produce, people don't travel, but now it's cheap and the markets are falling.
Yeah, okay. This is one of these things that's absolutely driving me crazy. Somehow people have confused what's happening. They somehow think that because oil's going down, that's bad for stock markets. No. They're separate. Oil is going down because the world is oversupplied with oil by 1 million barrels a day. That's not my number, by the way. That's the Energy Information Administration's number. 1 million barrels a day of extra crude on the markets. That's what's pushing oil down. What's pushing stocks down is the fact that we were overvalued. If there's a common link, it's that global growth is slower than we thought. 2.9% according to the World Bank. It's no longer 3 to 3.5%. That's the link, but let's not mistake what's driving stocks. It's not oil. Lower oil prices, good for consumers around the world.
Overall, it looks like the American economy is in a good shape, isn't it?
It's okay. It's 2 to 2.1%. I feel like Donald Trump saying it's okay. 2 to 2.1% is subpar growth. Typically coming out of recessions, you have growth that is in the threes, 3 to 3.5, and in times of strength, when there's a lot of government stimulus, you can get growth up to 4.5%. Again, we're half that. We're at 2.1% right now. So is the economy fine? It's doing okay. It could be better.
Could be better. Well, the $1 million question, if you are invested in stocks, Wall Street, should you bail out or stay?
Yeah, people tend to approach stocks as this like binary issue, either in or out. Don't do that. Instead, look for value. I ran my value screen with stocks down about 12% from the highs. I basically screened the S&P 500 for earnings growth of at least 10% and valuations of less than 10 times cash flow. I found about 24 names. Focus on individual names. That's how you can make money right now.
Well, if you look at 2016, your senses tell you that the outlook is positive, or is it, 2008 all over again?
It's not 2008 all over again. Let's be clear about that. In 2008, you had a total implosion of the banking sector. What's happening right now is a repricing of risk. That's totally different. That's why 2016 is not 2008. I totally disagree with George Soros, who actually tried to make that comment last week. I think George Soros is wrong. This is not 2008.
We got it. Adam Jonathan, thank you very much.
Thank you, Jacob.
And this has been The World This Week. We'll see you here next Sunday. Have a great week.